Okay, so are you ready for this one? Because today we're going deep into the dark side of online dating.
Oh, yeah, I think I'm ready.
You specifically requested we cover some creepy stories, and I gotta say, even I was surprised by some of these.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, they could sleep with the lights on kind of stuff.
Oh, wow.
Well, you know me, I'm always up for a good spooky story.
Yeah.
But as long as it's happening to someone else.
Yeah, that's probably a good approach.
So we're exploring a YouTube video by Mr. Nightmare called 3 Creepy True Online Dating Horror Stories.
Oh, yeah, that sounds right up our alley.
And before we jump into those, what are some of the dangers people should be aware of when they're, using dating apps or websites?
Oh, there are so many potential issues, but I think a big one is the inherent anonymity of the internet. It makes it so easy for people to misrepresent themselves.
Yeah.
And that can be anything from small lies about their age or appearance to truly malicious intentions like catfishing.
Oh yeah, catfishing where someone creates like a totally fake persona online. That's definitely scary stuff.
Right, and then there's the potential for miscommunication too.
Oh yeah, how so?
Well, what one person considers casual dating could be interpreted very differently by someone else.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And that's how you end up in those like awkward or even dangerous situations.
Okay, so let's unpack the first story, which Mr. Nightmare calls the bait and switch. It involves this 21-year-old guy who's new to online dating.
Yep.
He matches with a girl named Brenna on OkCupid, and they decide to meet up. He drives over to her place to pick her up.
Oh, so they're meeting at her house.
Yeah, and that's where things start to get a little strange.
Sure.
So Brenna's texting him, but her replies are really delayed.
Okay.
Then she tells him that her brother will meet him outside instead.
That's interesting. I mean, right there, those are already red flags.
Yeah.
If someone's being evasive or changing plans at the last minute, it's worth paying attention to.
Yeah.
And remember, always trust your gut feeling.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
If something feels off, it probably is.
Totally agree. So the quote-unquote brother comes out, and he doesn't even resemble Brenna.
Okay.
And, a lot of people meet their dates, friends or family eventually, but this is like their first meeting ever.
Yeah, this is not a good sign.
But despite that initial weirdness, the brother seems friendly enough. He chats with our narrator for a bit, then invites him inside to meet Brenna.
I think that's where a lack of awareness and maybe some naivete comes into play.
Yeah.
Meeting at someone's house, especially when you don't really know them, can be risky.
Right.
For a first date, always opt for a public place like a coffee shop, restaurant, somewhere with lots of people around.
Great advice. And in this case, yeah, things get even creepier inside the house.
Oh, yeah.
There are a couple other guys sitting on the couch just staring at him.
Oh, wow.
He tries to make small talk, but they're giving him these weird looks. Then he spots another guy in the dining room, also just watching him.
That unsettling atmosphere that's your intuition screaming at you to get out of there?
Sure.
At this point, I'd be looking for the nearest exit.
Yeah.
And honestly, this might be a good time to bring up a personal safety app.
Oh, yeah. Good idea.
There are apps that will share your location with trusted contacts, or you can even set it up so it'll automatically alert someone if you don't check in at a certain time.
Wait, that's the thing. I've never even heard of that.
Oh, yeah.
That's actually really smart.
Yeah. Technology can be a huge help when it comes to staying safe.
Right.
It's not just about finding dates, it's also about protecting yourself.
Well, in this case, our narrator's internal alarm bells are definitely going off.
Yeah, I bet.
So the brother is upstairs supposedly looking for Brenna, but the narrator decides to leave. He doesn't even turn his back on these guys.
Good for him.
He just makes a beeline for the door.
Good move. It sounds like he was starting to pick up on the danger.
And that's when one of the men on the couch yells, "Grab him!"
Oh my gosh. And just like that, the situation escalates.
Yeah.
This is why it's so important to have a plan in place. If you're meeting someone for the first time, let a friend or family member know where you're going, who you're meeting, and when you expect to be back.
Yeah.
It might seem like overkill, but it's better to be safe than sorry.
So they all chase him out of the house, kicking and hitting his car as he's driving away.
What a nightmare. It's incredible that he managed to escape.
He gets home, shaken, but thankfully unharmed.
Yeah.
He tells his parents what happened, and they encourage him to call the police, which he does.
Good.
A neighbor backs up his story, having seen those guys attacking his car. The police end up arresting 3 of the 4 men, but one is never identified.
Wow. So this raises the question, what were their motives? Was this a planned robbery or something more sinister?
Right.
We don't know, and that's what makes it even more disturbing.
So what are your thoughts on this whole scenario? Any key takeaways for our listener?
Well, I think it highlights the need to be proactive about safety, You can't always predict what's going to happen. But you can take steps to mitigate the risks, meet in public, share your plans, trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to leave if something feels wrong.
I think that's great advice and probably a good place to stop for today. So join us next time when we'll deep dive into 2 more creepy online dating stories.
Looking forward to it.
It's crazy to think that something that starts out with like a simple swipe, right,
Yeah.
could turn into a situation like that. I guess it just goes to show you never really know who you're dealing with online.
Exactly. And that brings us to our second story, the silent sleepover, which is less about overt danger and more about those blurred lines and miscommunication that can happen in online dating.
Yeah, this one is definitely more on the creepy and unsettling side, but in a totally different way. It focuses on a guy who's looking for something casual. He matches with a girl named Kylie on Match.com, and they agree to hang out at his apartment.
Okay.
He's thinking they'll watch a movie or something, but when Kylie arrives, she's really quiet and withdrawn.
This is where having a clear understanding of each other's expectations is so important.
Right.
It sounds like Kylie might have had a different idea of what hanging out entailed.
For sure, they spend a few hours in his room talking a little, watching TV, but there are these long, awkward silences. And at one point, he thinks about maybe making a move, like going in for a kiss, but something feels off.
Yeah, I get that.
Then Kylie thanks him for letting her sleep over.
Wait, what? Sleepover?
Right. It turns out when she said hang out for the night, she meant literally spending the night, so he finds some extra blankets and pillows. She makes a bed on the floor, and they don't speak another word. Eventually, he falls asleep.
You know, this reminds me of the whole concept of ghosting, where someone just disappears from the conversation without explanation.
Right.
It can be so frustrating and confusing, but in this case, Kylie's physical presence is actually adding to the unsettling vibe.
Absolutely. And it gets even weirder. He wakes up in the middle of the night, and Kylie's gone from the floor. He hears some noises downstairs, so he goes to investigate.
Oh, I don't like where this is going.
He finds her in the kitchen, sitting in a chair, facing the wall and muttering to herself. Oh, geez.
He calls out to her. She slowly turns her head, stares at him for a few seconds, and then turns back to the wall.
Okay, that's straight out of a horror movie. I'd be freaked out.
Totally. He rushes back to his room and calls his dad for advice.
Oh, no.
His dad, who's half asleep and doesn't really understand what's going on, tells him to call 911 if Kylie seems like she's having some kind of episode.
Okay.
But before he can even hang up the phone, he sees Kylie standing in his doorway.
Oh, wow.
Now, I know we're not supposed to delve into ethical considerations or psychological diagnoses,
Right.
but this story does raise some questions about mental health and how it can sometimes intersect with the world of online dating.
That's a really good point, and it's something to be mindful of. It's not our place to speculate, but it's a reminder that everyone has their own complexities.
Right. And back to the story, she's just standing there.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a few seconds, all he sees is her silhouette. Then she charges at him, screaming and trying to choke him.
Wow, that escalated quickly, and it shows how a situation that seems weird can turn dangerous in an instant. He manages to overpower her and yells for his dad to call the cops by the time they get there. He's dragged Kylie downstairs. The police take her away, and that's pretty much the end of the story.
We're left with a sense of relief that the narrator is okay, but also with a lot of unanswered questions about Kylie's behavior.
Yeah.
It definitely makes you think twice about inviting someone you barely know into your home.
No kidding. This story also emphasizes the importance of setting clear boundaries and being upfront about your expectations. And like you said earlier, if something feels off, don't ignore those red flags.
Exactly. Online dating can be fun and exciting, but it's crucial to prioritize your safety and well-being, and sometimes that means being assertive and setting limits.
Yeah.
It's okay to say no. It's okay to leave a situation that makes you uncomfortable, and it's always okay to call for help if you need it.
Okay, well, after those 2 intense stories, are you ready to dive into the final one? It's called The Midnight Watcher, and this one is truly bizarre, leaving us with more questions than answers. It really explores like the dark side of online interaction and how vulnerable we can be to people who might not have good intentions.
Oh, I am all ears, especially after you said it's more bizarre than the last 2. Bring it on.
So this last story from Mr. Nightmare's video takes us into the world of online stalking and harassment. It's called The Midnight Watcher, and I think it's going to make you rethink how much personal information you share online.
Oh, wow. I'm intrigued already. The idea of online stalking is terrifying because it feels like such a violation of privacy.
Right, and it's a reminder that even though we're interacting through screens,
Right.
the impact can be very real.
Absolutely. Digital footprints are real, and we need to be mindful of what we're leaving behind.
So in this story, the narrator is pretty experienced with online dating. He's on the app Badoo, and he's usually chatting with several girls at once, but then he starts talking to this girl named Maria, and their conversations are actually interesting. They're clicking.
Well, it's interesting how the story sets that up, this feeling of connection, which makes what happens next even more jarring.
Exactly. He finds himself looking forward to her messages. He asks if she wants to hang out that night, and she says yes, even asking for his address.
There's that lack of caution.
Yeah.
Again, he's already giving out his address without even getting her phone number.
Yeah.
You know, a simple Google voice number can be a lifesaver in these situations. It lets you keep your personal number private.
Right. He does try to get her number so they can text, but she never replies. After a while, her status on the app goes offline, but he figures she'll be back and goes back to watching TV, but hours go by and Maria stays offline.
The tension starts to build here. It's that feeling of something's not quite right, which, as we've discussed, you should never ignore.
He eventually goes to bed figuring the night is a bust, but then the next morning he wakes up to a bunch of notifications from Badoo. It's Maria, and she's sent a series of messages throughout the night.
Oh, geez. Okay, now I'm getting chills. Late night messages like that would definitely creep me out.
The messages are super unsettling. At 3 a.m. she sends, "I'm coming now." Then at 3:20 a.m. it's, "I'm here." And finally at 4 a.m. she writes, "I'm watching you." And the freakiest part is her status shows she's online at that moment.
This is where the psychological impact really hits.
Yeah.
You know, that feeling of being watched, especially by someone you don't know, can be incredibly disturbing. It plays on our deepest fears.
Then she sends another message. It just says, "How did you sleep?" His heart is racing and he checks all the windows to make sure they're locked. He types back, "Who the hell is this?"
Yeah.
And 10 seconds later the reply comes, "Check your closet and find out."
Oh my gosh, no way my heart would be pounding out of my chest.
He looks across the room and his closet door, which he knows he closed the night before, is now cracked open.
Oh no.
He freaks out screaming for his dad and runs into his dad's room, but his dad isn't home.
Oh, wow.
His older brother, who is home, hears him and they cautiously check the closet together. But there's no one there, no sign of forced entry, nothing. Then he realizes he forgot to lock his window the night before.
So there's that possibility that she actually was there watching, and that's terrifying.
He goes to the police to report the messages and hopefully track her down, but it turns out it's not that easy. He decides not to pursue legal action, but he spends the next week living in fear, constantly looking over his shoulder. Luckily, nothing else happens.
It's unfortunate that identifying and prosecuting online harassers can be so difficult. You know, it can leave victims feeling helpless.
So after diving into all three of these creepy stories, what are some key takeaways for our listener?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that online dating requires a healthy dose of caution.
Absolutely.
It's not just about finding a match, it's about protecting yourself.
What are some practical tips people can use to stay safe?
Well, first, be mindful of what you share online. Don't give out your address or personal information too quickly. Second, trust your instincts. If someone seems shady or makes you uncomfortable, block them or unmatch them.
Don't be afraid to ghost them if you have to. Yeah. Exactly. And third, meet in public places, at least for the first few dates, and tell a friend where you're going and who you're meeting.
Those are really good tips. This has been a fascinating, albeit slightly terrifying, deep dive into the dark side of online dating. Any final thoughts?
Just because these stories exist doesn't mean you should avoid online dating altogether. You know, it can be a great way to meet people.
Yeah.
Just be aware of the risks, take precautions, and remember, your safety is the priority.
Great advice. Well, that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. Stay safe out there, everyone.